The grand hall of Eldoria's royal palace gleamed with golden chandeliers and silk tapestries that told stories of centuries past. Annie stood at the entrance, clutching her invitation with trembling fingers. She had never imagined she would be here, among nobles and dignitaries, attending the kingdom's most prestigious ceremony, the annual gathering of distinguished citizens. Annie was a simple librarian from the countryside, someone who had won a minor literary award for preserving ancient texts. The invitation had arrived like a dream, sealed with royal wax. Now, standing in her borrowed emerald gown, she felt entirely out of place. The ceremony hall was filling rapidly. Nobles in their finest attire glided past her, their laughter musical and confident. Annie's heart hammered as she searched for somewhere to sit. The front rows were clearly reserved for people of importance: ministers, generals, and wealthy merchants. She wouldn't dare approach those seats. Her eyes landed on a quiet corner near the side wall, where a row of simple wooden chairs stood in the shadows, far from the ornate thrones at the center. Perfect. Annie hurried toward the empty seat, grateful for the anonymity it offered. She could observe the ceremony from a distance, fulfill her obligation, and slip away unnoticed when it ended. She settled into the chair, smoothing her dress and taking a deep breath. The orchestra began tuning their instruments, and the hall's energy shifted as people found their places. Annie allowed herself a small smile. She had made it through the hardest part, arriving and finding her spot. Then, a hush fell over the crowd. Annie looked up to see what had caused the sudden silence. Through the main doors walked Queen Serafina herself, resplendent in a gown of midnight blue embroidered with silver stars. Her crown caught the light, but it was her presence that truly commanded attention. Graceful, powerful, yet somehow approachable, the queen surveyed the room with calm, intelligent eyes. Annie quickly looked down, not wanting to be caught staring. She heard the rustle of fabric, the whisper of footsteps approaching. Surely the queen was heading to her throne at the front. Annie kept her gaze fixed on her hands. Then, to her absolute shock, someone sat down in the empty chair beside her. Annie's head snapped up. Queen Serafina was settling into the wooden chair next to her, arranging her magnificent gown with the same care Annie had used moments before. The queen's security detail looked alarmed, hovering nearby, but Serafina waved them back with a gentle hand. "Your Majesty," Annie managed to whisper, her voice barely audible. She started to rise, to curtsy, to do something appropriate, but the queen's hand touched her arm lightly. "Please, stay seated," Queen Serafina said, her voice warm and surprisingly ordinary. "The ceremony is about to begin, and I find I'm rather tired of sitting on thrones today." Annie's mind raced. Why would the queen choose this spot? Was this some sort of test? Had she taken someone important's seat by mistake? As if reading her thoughts, the queen smiled. "You look terrified." "Please don't be. I chose to sit here quite deliberately." "But why?" Annie's voice came out as a squeak. "Because," the queen said, her eyes twinkling. "I saw you standing at the entrance, looking as overwhelmed as I felt during my first royal ceremony 30 years ago. And I noticed you chose the seat furthest from attention, which tells me you're someone who values substance over spectacle. Those are the people I most want to meet." The ceremony began before Annie could respond. A minister took the podium and began reading proclamations. Annie tried to focus on the words, but her awareness was consumed by the queen sitting beside her. Serafina seemed genuinely at ease, occasionally leaning over to whisper explanations of the more archaic traditions being performed. "That banner represents the Treaty of Three Rivers," the queen murmured during one particularly long ritual. "Terribly boring, but the Duke insisted we include it." Annie found herself relaxing despite the surreal situation. The queen wasn't what she had imagined. She was witty, observant, and refreshingly honest about the tedium of court life. During a musical interlude, the queen turned to her fully. "I read about your work preserving the Chronicles of Morrow. That collection was thought lost for generations." Annie's eyes widened. "You know about that? I do my research on everyone invited to these gatherings," Serafina said. "Your dedication to those dusty tomes means our children will know their history. That matters more than most of what happens in this room. I love the stories," Annie said, feeling braver. "They deserve to be remembered." "So they do," the queen agreed. Tell me, what's your favorite? For the next hour, as the ceremony droned on around them, Annie and Queen Serafina talked about ancient tales, forgotten heroes, and the power of preserving truth. Annie forgot her nervousness. The queen forgot her crown. They were simply the people who loved stories, sitting side by side in wooden chairs, finding unexpected friendship in an unlikely place. When the ceremony finally concluded, the queen stood and extended her hand to Annie. "Walk with me for a moment." They strolled to a quieter corner. While the nobles buzzed about the queen's unusual choice of seating, Serafina seemed unbothered by the gossip. "Annie," the queen said, "I would like to commission you for a special project. The royal archives need someone with your passion and expertise. Would you consider working at the palace?" Annie's breath caught. "Your Majesty, I would be honored." Serafina smiled. "Good, and perhaps occasionally, you'll join me for tea and tell me more stories. It's lonely at the top, and I find I quite enjoyed sitting at the side today." As Annie left the palace that evening, she realized that sometimes the most extraordinary moments come from the simplest choices, like choosing an empty seat on the side, and finding that even queens need friends who see them as more than their crowns. The invitation in her pocket now felt like the beginning of something wonderful, born from the moment when royalty chose humanity, and a nervous librarian discovered that courage often comes when we least expect it.